Mark, my first video game was a pinball machine.
That doesn't surprise me. I think that tracks.
So we had one in the laundry room at our house, and it was a real one. Like it was a real mechanical, like retro. Even for that time, it was the early '80s. It was retro. It was
I,
spring loaded. Yeah,
your
it had a.
dad probably fixed it up, right? I could see that.
I think we traded a car for it. It
Oh,
came. It was bartered somehow. I don't. Somehow we got. Okay, so it was spring loaded. It had a plunger. It had a metal ball. It had those flippers with the rubber bands on them, right? And
yeah.
it felt like you were operating machinery. It was Bally Magic Carpet. I still look for them today. Every once in a while, I'll be on
Oh,
eBay being like, "Can I find one?" But they're hard to maintain, right? But the cool thing about it was it only went to like you see new ones, you see new like digital ones now, and
yeah.
the score goes up to the millions, and that must
Yeah.
be fun to watch. But this one went up to 9,999, and then it flipped over to zero. It was like Y2K, right? It was just flip over to zero. So the real score wasn't how high it got. It was how many times you flipped it over. So
Yeah.
you'd come out of the laundry room and my brother would say to me, like, "What's your score?" He'd be like, "9." It's like, "9." I'm like, "9." I flipped it 9 times. That's how good I got at it, right? But I remember the first time I played it, I was standing there and nobody told me what I was supposed to do. Nobody explained the rules, but nobody had to. You pulled back the plunger, you let it go, the ball goes in, and you try to keep it in there as long as you can, and you have 2 flippers to pull it off, right? The machine made the rules obvious. The ball goes in, the flipper stopped the ball from leaving, you hit things to score. It was completely self-evident. No training required.
Brass lantern on the counter, half an hour left to burn. Mailbox near the White House, nowhere left to turn. Words in phosphor green, you are likely to be eaten.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of design is either, brilliant, intuitive design, or maybe it's the universe's simplest possible game loop. For me, like, I remember pinball, sure, but I never played pinball that much. For me, it was the Atari 2600 and the game Pitfall.
I remember Pitfall.
Pitfall, Harry.
I remember Pitfall.
Yeah, I played that game for hours and hours. It was a time when my uncle was living with us as well. And when my uncle played, he would like press the buttons and he'd be like jumping and skipping around with it, as if to like get Pitfall Harry to move a little bit, but again, the evidence, right? It was evident: running, jumping, swinging on vines, avoiding crocodiles. Like, there's a pit. Don't go in the pit. Don't get eaten by the crocodiles. And okay, so I got to tell you this: Activision had this thing that where if you hit a certain score, you take a picture of the screen, your TV screen, because you don't have a monitor; it was a TV, right?
Right, it was a TV.
On channel 2 or channel 3, right? You mail it in, and they'd send you a patch, a real patch, in the mail. It was like a little triangle or something. And I played until I hit the score. I took the picture, mailed it off, and there it is. My little patch that showed up, a physical object for a thing I did on screen.
That's how they drove engagement, because back in the day, we had no other way to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, it was like 1983 or something. Yeah.
Right. But I wasn't good at it though. Like if the ball came straight down the middle, which it often did, because there's no money to lose, right? The thing that you would drop the quarters in, the metal plate on the front, it had a key in it. You just open it, and then there was just this wire where you just keep pushing it down. It would just keep giving you credits, and so you never had to put any money in it. Oh, and then my dad was doing the electrical in the house at the time, and whenever he would put in an outlet, like there's these
The
round
slugs.
things that you would that you would poke through the outlet, and so we would put those in too. Occasionally they got stuck, but usually they worked. But actually, I could feel myself getting incrementally better every time, right? The flippers, my reaction with the flippers was better. I started, figuring out based on where it hit, where the ball was going to go. I started leaning into it. I'm not going to say I didn't tilt the machine once or twice, but, without a tutorial, without instructions, without anybody explaining, how to put some weight behind it, Yeah, I just got better. You just got better because you
Yeah.
did it more and more and more.
Yeah. No, that's the entire design philosophy of the arcade era and, one simple story, right? No tutorial, no manual, and your best lessons, right, is failure. That's the instruction.
And I think pinball's interesting as a starting point because it's not a video game, right? There's no display, there's no software. It's entirely physical and mechanical. But it contains every design principle that the video games would spend the next 50 years refining, right? And we've got a clear objective, immediate feedback, escalating difficulty, the dopamine loop of, a near miss. I mean, the designers of Pong and Space Invaders grew up on pinball machines. That's not a
Yes.
coincidence. They were translating the same logic onto a screen,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. The coin op industry in the late 60s and early 70s is, totally dominated by pinball. Bally, Williams, Gottlieb, these companies were making all the money, just millions. And then Atari came along in 1972 with Pong, and, they say, well, what if pinball, but on a screen? And now you can play against somebody else. And the industry totally shifted right then.
But the reason Pong landed, right? The reason it felt immediately intuitive to people who never touched a computer is because they spent their whole lives understanding a ball bouncing off a surface. The physics are fake, right? The underlying instinct is real, but the physics are fake. Atari didn't teach people a new skill. They gave people a screen to use and a skill they already had, which is
Yeah.
why people loved Pong.
Yeah.
Oh, plus you could put the English on it, right? Like you could make it bounce crazy if you just turned it really fast. It was fun. Pong was fun.
Yeah, the best games don't require you to learn how to think. They translate thinking you already do into a new medium.
And every game since, every game in the 50 years between that pinball machine in the laundry room or wherever, and whatever's running on your phone right now is some version of the same project. How do you take something a human brain already wants to do and build a world where doing it is possible and meaningful and crucially fun when it fails?
Yeah.
When it fails.
Yeah, that's the winning strategy right there. So let's go back to 1972 here. That was, you were alive, or you were alive then.
Oh, stop it. Yeah, I was like 4.
Okay, yeah. It's just a tiny bit before me. So most Americans had never touched a computer. Computers are the size of refrigerators, right? And they live in universities. They require punch cards. Go back and listen to the punch card episode. They output data on paper reels. Go listen to the printer, the printer episode. Nobody is having fun with these systems.
And then some engineers decided to put a ball on a screen and charge quarters for it.
Yeah, Atari releases Pong. They got 2 paddles. Have you ever seen, because it went through several revisions, and I remember my grandparents actually had like an OG hook it to the TV Pong system, and it was weird, like U-shaped connectors that you plugged onto the screws. You'd screw them down, and yeah, it was a little weird.
Yeah,
But
it was a little beige, like, square, and it
yeah,
had 2 knobs on it, and it said "Pong" on it. Yeah, it
yeah,
was good.
no cartridges, no,
Nope, that's
just
all it did.
yeah. So 2 paddles, 1 ball, no narrative. There's no story to Pong, right? 1000% cultural impact. It's just huge impact. It's technically not even the first video game, though. That's a whole nerd. We go down talking about Space War and tennis and cathode ray tube amusement machine. Those are like OG, underground stuff. But Pong is the moment when gaming enters the sort of public consciousness, because Pong is in bars, Pong is in bowling alleys, Pong is accessible.
And here's the design insight that people miss about Pong. It was a 2-player game. From day
Yeah.
1, gaming was social. Not the lonely nerd in a basement stereotype that came later. Po That's what happened with the single shooter game. You were just a nerd with a headset on, right? But Pong I can't play those, they make me sick. But Pong required another human being. It required a rival. You couldn't play it alone in any no, seriously, have you ever tried? It's like playing the piano. Like, one hand is trying to beat the other hand, you can't. You can't. Your brain doesn't work like it's just there's no meaningful way to do that.
Which is true of almost all the early arcade games. Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga. They had leaderboards, high scores, public competition, right? You would literally go to the arcade and the people around watching you. Gaming is performance, right? You put your initials up, you claimed territory in the arcade, AAA, spell out whatever initials, maximally annoyed the store owner. You put in, all whatever words you wanted in there.
All order of bad names. Like, just somebody had to look at ASS on the on the screen for sure. I knew someone who had the Galaga high score at a pizza place for 3 years. 3 years! He'd stop in just to check that no one knocked him off. And if they had, he'd have stayed to fix that. He'd be like, oh, I'll beat that, right? And then you'd be like, all right, you can have it. I'm going to go home. He had a parasocial attachment to a pizza parlor arcade cabinet. And I don't think that was like unique to his ADD. I think a lot of people did that.
As sort of a community infrastructure, right? But what happens when they unplug the thing and then,
there's a whole Seinfeld episode when George had the high score on Frogger. He didn't want to lose it, so they tried to figure out how to take it without unplugging it. It was a whole Seinfeld episode about that. All right, but the thing that changed everything, I don't know, Zork. Zork changed everything. It holds a place in my cold heart. Zork. I loved that game. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it changed everything, it's a different type of game, a different type of engagement, right? So, all right, so for people that don't know, right, for the uninitiated, Zork is a text-based adventure game released in 1977. Originally developed at MIT, not CMU this time. No graphics, no music. I mean, it's 1977, so what do you expect? No controller. There's a cursor, and it says, you're standing in an open field west of a White House with a boarded front door. There's a small mailbox here.
Yeah. And that's it. That's the whole game, except it's not, because now you type, go north, or open the mailbox, or take the leaflet. Oh, by the way, when you did take the thing out of the mailbox and you opened it and you say, read it, it's the credits for everybody who wrote the game. And then you put it back in the mailbox because technically it's not your mail. And the game responds. The game is parsing your words. It has a vocabulary. It has a world model. It knows what's in every room and what you're carrying and whether the lantern you have is lit. Like if you walked into a dark room and your lantern wasn't lit, it would be like, you can't see anything. You're in a dark room. You snap, light the lantern. Now what's in here? Right?
Well, you better do it quick, right? Or else you know what happens. Zork had one of the most sophisticated natural language parsers of the era. It could handle multi-word commands, indirect objects, complex sequences, put the sword in the chest, then close it. It understood that. Now that being said, if you shifted just a little too much left or right, around the wording, not so good.
No.
But but if you knew the nouns and verbs that worked, then you could string the nouns and verbs together pretty well. And that's in 1977 on hardware with 64K of memory.
And it had the Grue.
Yeah, okay, the Grue. So the Grue is a creature that lives in darkness. You can't see it, you can't fight it. The only thing you know about it is that if you're in the dark, it will eat you. So hence, you better make sure that lantern is lit. The game's message, if you enter an unlit area, it is pitch black. You're likely to be eaten by a Grue.
Yeah, right. You might be. Not be careful. You're likely to be eaten by a Grue. That's a promise. That's just a promise, right? And because you can't see it, because it's never described, like to me, it was Grendel. Your imagination does all the work. The Grue is whatever your brain decides is the most terrifying. It's the first procedurally generated horror experience, except the procedure is your own psychology.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really good.
Technically, the Grue was also a clever resource management mechanism. The lantern fuel was limited. You had to budget light. The Grue turned darkness from an aesthetic into a systems threat.
It's an elegant design that made me afraid of the dark in different ways than I was before, which is a sentence I'd never thought I'd say about a game with no graphics.
The Zork matters beyond those mechanics, though. It established the idea that a game could have a world, a whole place that you could explore, not just a level with lore, a story, with internal consistency, with things that existed even when you weren't looking at them. The great underground empire wasn't just rooms on a map. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
civilization, and with a history. You had to discover it as you explored, the universe, with architecture, with the narrative, you uncovered it, through that process.
So back in the day, they would print magazines, computer magazines, right? And
Oh
every
yeah.
once in a while, you'd find one that had the whole map to the underground empire, and you'd buy that one, and then you would laminate it so that you had it by the computer, so you knew what room you were in, because you knew you walk straight, I'm in this room. You turned left, I'm in this room. Now you know that room has only 2 other rooms off of it, so you're not gonna go, like, left, you're gonna go right because you know that room goes somewhere. Like, it was a whole thing. I can't
I
even.
used grid paper, like graph paper. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, my dad went and bought the magazine, so we had a full-on map, and you could win it or you could fail it, and losing didn't feel arbitrary. Losing felt logical. If you ran out of lantern oil and stumble in the dark, you get eaten. I mean, that's fair. It's not like they didn't tell you. That's the world's rules. It's the consequence. Zork taught a generation that games could have coherent internal logic and that the game wasn't out to cheat you. It's not like being in Vegas playing the slots where it's out to cheat you. No, it's just honest about its stakes.
Yeah. Sometimes I've played and I felt like yeah, the random, whatever random number generator was using was a little unfair. Wasn't as random as, it should have been. But it taught a generation to save obsessively. You'd enter a new room, save, enter a new room, save.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
the floppy disk would be like chunk, chunk,
Yeah.
chunk, 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 chunk.
Yeah. Because if you mess up in Zork, you're deeply permanently messed up, right? There's no autosave, no respawn. You can, render the game unwinnable, basically. If you carry a critical item into a situation that destroys it. If you use the match, without lighting the lantern, you're toast. You're right. And you'll find out, 30 minutes later when you needed that item, and guess what? It's gone.
Which taught a generation about irreversibility. It taught us about consequences that compound, about thinking 3 moves ahead, and for those of us who weren't good at chess, it was the only experience we were gonna have doing that, right? Which is and I'm one of them, which is either great cognitive training or the reason I have trust issues. It's possibly both. But before we move on, this is the era of ET. Let's talk about ET. Or do you wanna wait for the '80s, like, in-home console? I think because we can't close this out without actually having to talk about that. So you know what? We'll talk about ET because I think, like, as we're sitting here talking about these games, at the same time, though, I remember my Atari 800, which was my first computer that's running on 8 meg of RAM. Like, that's and an external floppy, the big floppy disks, that's where you would store things. You didn't store it in, like, it had almost no working memory,
Yeah.
but even with almost no working memory, there was things you could play. I still played Fogger. I still had a joystick. I could still do
Yeah.
all that on that machine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that it wasn't really like, I would hate for everybody to think we were in the dark ages because it was the beginning, but it wasn't necessarily the dark ages.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the
right?
consoles, the console wars, there've been many console wars, right? And, you have this kind of, even in the early days, there was this multiple paths. Arcade systems were arcade systems, and they were running on far better hardware and sound and all of that than you could afford to bring into your home. Then you had, home computers, right? An Apple II, right? The original IBM
Right.
PC, the TRS-80. I played Zork the first time on a TRS-80. And, some of the other early text-based games as well. So the TRS-80, that was it. But I think, all of those platforms had text-based systems. And then consoles, right? Pong being an early example of a console, the Atari 2600, the Atari 800, what was Intellivision, Coleco, like,
Coleco.
right? These are all
Yeah.
pretty early kinds of systems, but yeah. So let's talk about how that collapsed. so so by the mid '80s, the home console market had collapsed. So all of those that we had talked about, the Atari 2600, the Atari, 800, this whatever, all the different numbers they had, Coleco and Television. The crash of 1983 was sort of catastrophic to the home game market. Too many games, too little quality control, consumer confidence just gone. The industry was basically declared dead. And if you remember some of these games, like, they were crap. Like,
Wait, E.T. So
like
they
E.T.
okay. So
Okay.
let's talk about it.
All right.
E.T. comes out, and it's a joint thing, and it's the first time I think everybody's thinking, "Oh, this new market of games, people are buying them like
Right.
Pitfall. People are just buying this stuff." It's like, let's do one because E.T. hadn't come out yet. I think we think about E.T. as being like always been there. No, there was a time when like that movie was just coming to the theaters.
Yeah.
Yes, and Spielberg decides, what a great thing. It'll be that
A
and
video game.
the game. Like,
Yeah.
how amazing. And so here's all these designers at Atari, and there's a whole documentary about this if y'all want to go watch it. But like they go to Atari and they say, we want you to create this game. They're like, okay, how much time do we have? They're like, 6 weeks. They're like, what? Like, yeah, 6 weeks. Got 6 weeks before it launches. We want to launch them together. Can you guys do it? And stupid Atari said, yeah. And so like
Sure.
here they have one designer who's supposed to figure this out and a bunch of programmers that are supposed to, and you know what? They just decided, we're doing a lot of coke. We might be able to pull this off. Let's do it. Let's do it. We got the coke. We got the weed. We're going to do this. And they start on this journey where they develop this, what seemed like Zork. It was a world.
Right.
It was a world, right? You were going into different rooms. Elliot was doing different things. He was looking under rocks, like E.T. ran away. Elliot has to find him before the government finds him. That's the whole game's about that, right? Now imagine up until this point, you're a guy on a vine, like flying over crocodiles, and it was completely linear, right?
You know what E.T. reminds me of is that 2600 game Adventure. Did you ever play that one?
Yes.
It reminds me of that, but Adventure, you were just a little cursor and you had to like go through the maze and then pick up the sword or the arrow and, you could walk back through the maze. It was sort of like, it was a crappy game. Let's be honest. It was sort of
right. But it was a first-person kind of game, and you were given a world to kind of navigate, right?
You had to explore.
You had to explore, and so like that was E.T., but they only had 6 weeks to do it. E.T. was pixelated and terrible. I mean, Elliot found him and gave him a potted plant or something, and his heart glowed red, and yay, everybody wins. It was terrible. It was universally panned. It was panned, like everybody hated it. Warner Brothers had created so many of these things, they had them in a warehouse. And like the guy who created it was so ashamed of his work, he quit being a game developer and got into social work. He wanted to, like people who couldn't deal with life, he wanted to counsel them because he couldn't deal with his own life anymore. It was really a sad outcome for what if you ask game makers today, the guys who design Zelda, go ask them today, what was the thing that brought you to what you want to do? And they're like, man, E.T., what a crazy game that was. Like, you got to be Elliot. Like, you got to go do that. That was crazy. But then with that came the second greatest, like mythological story in the history of anything. And it's that Warner Brothers was also so ashamed that they buried it in the desert of Albuquerque. Never to be seen again. And then one day, some guy spent 10 years of his life, because it was a landfill. They buried it in a landfill, but they didn't bury it in a landfill. They emptied the warehouse. The truck took it to that landfill in Albuquerque and dumped it. And so one guy spent 10 years of his life going through all the landfill records until he felt like he knew where it was. and he pretty much knew how far they would have to core to find it. And so before they turned that landfill into housing, they were about to level it down, pound it all in, and put houses on it in Albuquerque. They decide, or not even Albuquerque. It's
like Tucson or something, right?
No, it's Alamogordo. It's out that way.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's way out that way. And so they're ready to do this, but before they let in the contractors to start building the houses, they let them core. And they core it, and they get down, like, I don't wanna say, like, 200 feet. It was ridiculous. It was a really big coring operation. And they pull up what? Cartridges for ET. And they didn't just pull up one. They pulled up, like, 10,000 of them.
That's a
and
lot.
when they did, Alamogordo sold them on eBay and made over $100,000 on them. So the city made a ton of money. People who loved the game. I mean, there were people standing all around waiting for that core to come up to see if they got it. Like, it was I have looked it up, and when I was there, I was in Alamogordo. I was just going around New Mexico having a really good time. And I said, we must stop at this street corner because that's where E.T. was buried. It's a thing. It's a thing, right? It turned into this big, like, epic, like, urban tale. But at the end of the day, the people who worked at Warner Brothers just said, no, we just needed room in the warehouse, and that's where it ended up. I'm sorry you guys, in retrospect, think it was something great, but at that time, we had 15,000 of them we couldn't get rid of, so we just buried them.
But that's that's why the market collapsed. The game was bad, but the economics around it is what really collapsed the market. All, like, basically, people don't remember this, but there wasn't a game shop, or a video game place. There was, these toy stores and, kind of specialty retail and stuff. And these guys had to order, from the distributor, a whole ton of games, even if it didn't matter if they sold or not. And they got stuck with, lots and lots of copies of these ET games, and they couldn't sell them. And it forced, some of these guys out of business. They, got mad. They sent it back to the distributor and, didn't get any money back. So, that's why Warner Brothers got all this stock back. And, it kind of cratered selling of games inside of toy shops and the mall and stuff like that. It just, ruined companies economically. But then, Nintendo. Talk about the entertainment system.
So they called it an entertainment system, not a game console. And they sold it with a robot.
Oh, gosh,
because toy stores had stopped carrying the game consoles. Nintendo said, we're a toy company. Here's your toy. It comes with a robot and a gun. There's one way to do it, right?
the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, known as the Famicom in Japan, launches in North America in 1985 with Super Mario Brothers. And here's the design philosophy embedded in, World 1-1, right? If you know Super Mario Brothers. It's been analyzed by game designers for 40 years now. It teaches you everything you need to know without a single word of instruction.
Right. Mario appears on the screen moving right. The level's designed so the first thing you encounter is a question mark block just above Mario's head. It's floating there. It's suspicious. You will almost certainly try to hit it. And when you do, you get a mushroom and you grow. You get power. You understand, right? The entire control language of the game is communicated through environmental design before you've pressed a button intentionally.
I think that's Miyamoto's sort of design genius. Of course, it's Japanese, right? Like I think that these guys are really good at that kind of intuitive design. He said the first goomba, the first enemy in World 1-1, was placed specifically to teach you that enemies exist and that contact is death. It walks directly into you if you stood still, and that's an intentional part of the design. You die early and you learn early, and then you go on from there. And then, Sega. Sega arrives.
Sega.
Right. And so console wars, kind of when it really kind of kicked off, the console wars begin again. Sega does what Nintendo don't, was the actual marketing slogan. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Nintendo don't. Yeah, it was the 80s. which is historically one of the most aggressive corporate marketing campaigns ever run by a company with the hedgehog mascot. I think it's got to be like that and the Burger Wars, right?
Oh, those
Pepsi,
got nasty too.
yeah, Pepsi and Coke and Burger
Yeah.
King versus McDonald's. Well, Sega versus Nintendo.
Nintendo. Sonic was explicitly designed to be cool. It was cool, which is a weird design brief. Design me cool. But they pulled it off. Fast, attitude, finger wagging at the player if you stood still too long. The game was impatient with you. It had options about your gaming pace, and that was new. It had opinions about that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it was going to pick on you. I mean, Guitar Hero did it too, but like this is way before then, right?
Yeah. Is Crash Bandicoot Sega? Is that the Sega? Didn't you and Sam
No, Crash
like...
was Atari.
Oh, okay. I think it
Wasn't
wasn't.
I think
Didn't Sam like Crash Bandicoot?
I still like Crash. I
Yeah.
still play it. Crash Team
Yeah.
Racing is still my favorite game.
There you go. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. I remember one of you were a Crash fan. The 16-bit era was when gaming got its first real kind of identity crisis. Should games be about depth or spectacle? Nintendo said depth, RPGs, Zelda, story. Sega, on the other hand, said spectacle, speed, attitude, blast processing, which was a marketing term that meant, nothing technically, but it sounds incredible. Blast processing.
The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, is arguably the game that proved gaming could be an art before anyone was using that phrase. The dual world mechanic, light world, dark world. It was a narrative device, a structural device, a gameplay device simultaneously, right? The same map, inverted and corrupted, the same kingdom, sick. That's a metaphor. That's literature. That's a game using its own mechanics to communicate meaning. Yeah, Zelda kind of changed it, right? Zelda changed it.
Yeah, I never played the Zelda games and stuff. I was a PC gamer when I was, that age, but I had people that that played and stuff. Technically, A Link to the Past is, one of the most sophisticated dungeon design philosophies of that period of time, that era. Each dungeon introduces a new item. That item was required to defeat the boss. It was also the key to secrets in every dungeon you'd already explored. The game was constantly rewarding, re-engagement with past content via new tools.
And it made you feel smart, which, can we talk about this as one of the great underappreciated achievements of game design? The best games don't make you feel like a button presser. They make you feel like a genius. The puzzle clicks, the path opens, the boss falls, and for 1 second, you feel like you solved something. You feel clever. That feeling is design engineered. It ain't you, but it is a gift.
Yeah, yeah. So I sort of transitioned, when I was a kid, to PC rather than platforms and consoles and stuff. And my dad and I built this 386 DX40. If you remember, an Intel 386 DX40.
Yeah.
And so, you think about dungeon design, I played Doom, and, you memorize the maps, you go level to level. You could jump from that 2D to 3D now, in that corridor space, and you could move through it. So, that was the kind of the beginning of that actual three-dimensional journey inside of the PC space. But on the console side,
Well, wait, let's talk about that for 1 second,
Yeah.
because I don't think people realize that we used to build our own PCs for this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, they do now, right? I mean,
So yeah, if you're a hardcore gamer, you probably do go out and buy your own really fast processors and install them into some, chassis that cost you almost nothing, or was some other thing you used, or
the lights.
But
They got the lights and the liquid cooling.
they do all that, right? But that anything you wanted to run like that, you really had to go down to Radio Shack and figure out how you were going to make this work, or you ordered it online, or not online, in a catalog. You picked out what you needed, you ordered it all together, but you didn't go buy an alien laptop off of someone and just be like, it's gaming ready. Like, you really paid a lot. Like, you had to go build one, which is
Yeah.
why I didn't do that. I actually used consoles. Like, I used consoles. We bought that stuff.
Yeah. Well, in Southern California, there was these. It's probably like once a month or so. There was a big giant computer show, and it was at the
Mm.
Pomona Fairgrounds, and all the local computer shops would have a booth, and you would go from booth to booth to booth looking at, who's got the best price on this motherboard, who's got the best price on memory, who's got the best price on this processor. And then you'd pick them up and you'd Frankenstein together a PC. And we did that. We did that a lot. We did that a lot. We built, PCs for
See what you
ourselves,
guys
but
missed. Yeah, you
yeah.
guys missed it. It was a big hobbyist thing back in the
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
for
No, the
sure.
big hobbyist movement was huge, and we ended up building PCs for police officers that were, cops in my dad's office and stuff, because they were stuck using typewriters, and then all of a sudden you had a word processor you could use. But that's a story for another episode. So, but 1996, the new console era arrives. The Nintendo 64 launches. Super Mario 64 ships as a pack-in title. That's a bundle that, you get a game with the, it didn't always used to be that you would get a game with
You
the big
know,
console. Yeah.
it was not.
And every person who played it at launch describes the same experience with the Super Mario 64. You walk around the courtyard outside Peach's castle and they stop. You just stop and you look at it.
Because it was in 3D. Actual 3D, not an illusion of depth with perspective tricks, not, mode 7 fake 3D. Real three-dimensional space that you could orbit, that you could see from above and below and behind. I mean, it had mass. Like, it existed.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's what 64-bit brought you. It was crazy.
Yeah, the camera problem is this sort of great unsolved design challenge of the 3D era. And Mario 64 was the first game to genuinely grapple with it on the console side. You now had to control your character and manage the camera, two sort of cognitive functions simultaneously. Some people, never really adapted to that. Some people found it just sort of instantly natural. You're swiveling your head and moving your eyes at the same time, right? The camera became its own kind of mini game inside every 3D game for a decade.
Yeah, well, Renee never quite mastered it. Anyway, Sony entered the room. So meanwhile, a few moments later, Sony enters. PlayStation. CDs instead of cartridges. That's crazy, right?
I know.
Loading times that would be considered criminal today. It would take forever to load, but you didn't matter. Like, you'd kick it off, walk away, go to the bathroom because you were going to sit down. But also came Final Fantasy VII.
Okay, so Final Fantasy. You know what always confused me about Final Fantasy is that none of them have anything to do with each other. They're all
Yeah, they're all
called
they're all separate. Yeah.
they're all called Final Fantasy, but they have nothing to do with each other.
And
Yeah.
there's so many of them. It was never final. I mean,
Yeah, right. It was forever fantasy, right? Final Fantasy VII, though, deserves its own episode at some point. We should probably go into like one of the, a whole deep dive on games, its own, doctorate, a Library of Congress designation. So it's a moment when games made people cry. Not, oh no, I did so bad. No, not, I'm so frustrated. I could throw this game out and cry. Cry because a character died. Cry because of a narrative loss, a real story, an emotional story. Cry the way you cry at a movie. Cry because you were emotionally invested in a polygon with spiky hair. It's very spiky. And, people were not prepared.
yeah, I don't think anyone was. And the marketing didn't say, warning, this game will emotionally devastate you in a church. It just said, experience the epic adventure. And we said, okay. And then
And then
the games were undeniably capable of producing genuine human grief, which is either the mark of extraordinary artistic achievement or proof that we're extremely susceptible to narrative manipulation via polygons and a MIDI score. Maybe both.
Probably
I mean,
both.
you are pretty immersed in that, right? I didn't care if my Tamagotchi died, but
Yeah.
I wasn't emotionally invested in that like it was me, right? That single person thing is really, yeah, it's interesting. We're being
Yeah.
manipulated again by algorithms because we always are.
The PlayStation era also gives us the survival horror game as a genre. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, games that weaponize the medium itself, against you. Limited ammo, tank controls that made you slow and clumsy, cameras positioned to maximize dread, music manipulation, right? The horror came from the controls as much as the monsters, though.
Silent Hill specifically, it used the hardware limitations of the PlayStation as a design tool. The draw
So
distance,
smart.
that
So
you can't
smart.
draw it out very far, right? The console couldn't read far objects, so instead of pretending that wasn't true, the game put the town in perpetual fog. The technical limitations became its literal aesthetic. The horror came from what you couldn't see, which is also, incidentally, not very good horror writing. I'm not
No,
gonna
it
say
is.
Stephen King's everything he ever wrote in the fog was bad, but probably
Well,
wasn't as interesting.
I don't know. I think that's okay, right? I think that's good. When you can't see everything. I think that's all right. But it is what it is. So okay, consoles. We're talking about the '90s. The late '90s, and then the internet happens to games, and things change all over again.
The early 2000s online gaming era was simultaneously the best and worst period in gaming culture. EverQuest, Ultima Online, World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
You could play with strangers across the planet. You could build guilds. You could coordinate 40 people in real time to fight a dragon. Meanwhile, you couldn't manage a team of 40 people who were trying to develop anything, but you could figure out how to put them all on the internet to kill a dragon. I don't know. I don't see how that couldn't translate, but it never did. And you could also get called unspeakable things by a 13-year-old from Ohio who had no social accountability whatsoever. That's true too.
Yeah.
That happened
Xbox,
to Elon.
man. Xbox. Oh, I know. Xbox Live was just sort of rife with really just
Awful kids.
atrocious kids, man. World of Warcraft at its peak had 12 million subscribers paying monthly fees.
Wow.
I know, a lot. 12 million. It had its own economy and real-world exchange rates between in-game gold and actual currency, which when the game first came out was you weren't supposed to be able to do. It had social structures that mirrored corporate hierarchies. Guild leadership required project management, conflict resolution, scheduling coordination. People put WoW Guildmaster on their resumes. Like, I've seen that seriously.
This could be why I was not getting hired. I managed a handful of actual people. Maybe that was my problem.
Yeah.
Maybe I needed a guild because then I could prove
Yeah.
I could do big projects.
Yeah, I think my dad still plays this game, but I don't know. I played it a little and I just,
Well,
yeah,
not if
he
it's that
was,
complicated. Who wants to do that? And you know what? Those skills transferred. The people who ran high-level raid guilds in World of Warcraft were managing logistics, personnel, and strategy for dozens of people in real time. That's
Yeah.
legitimately complex organizational leadership with the added benefit of dragon slaying. I mean, why is that not cool?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It lost the appeal when I saw how it just sort of sucked people in and they couldn't, people couldn't get out. Open worlds, you're right. It was sort of, World of Warcraft is not, it's open world, but it's not exactly open world in the same sense that something like Grand Theft Auto 3 was in 2001. It was the first time a mainstream game offered genuine systemic freedom. You don't follow this path, freedom, actual go anywhere, do anything, freedom. The city existed whether you were there or not. Cars drove, pedestrians walked, crime happened, because of course it's Grand Theft Auto. The world didn't care about you. You were just one agent inside the simulation.
And the moral panic that Grand Theft Auto generated, which was at the time spectacular,
Yes.
was largely missed the actual design innovation. The critics were focused on content. Now, to be fair, you did drag people out of a car, beat them, and
Yeah.
steal their car. I mean, like,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't, morally, high-minded. The
Right.
designers were building the first widely accessible sandbox simulation. They were teaching players that the systems have consequences, the world responds to your actions, that emergent behavior is interesting, and, arguments about the game miss the argument that the game was actually making. I mean, they were upset about the violence, but it really was a step forward.
But in this era here, we have games like Elden Ring, they have no tutorials, no hand-holding, no explanation, and sell 40 million copies. Minecraft has no objective, no end state, no instruction, and becomes the best-selling game in history. Where a game can be defined entirely by the absence of conventional game design.
Which brings us back to my laundry room and a metal ball, because the girl who stood in front of that pinball machine and figured out the rules without being told, that's the same instinct that pulled people into Zork, into Zelda, into Dark Souls. The medium kept saying, here's a system, figure it out. And we kept saying, yeah, and we still do it today. Download something from the App Store. There's
Yeah.
no manual. You just figure out how to get the Yeti to steal stuff off of a picnic basket. We're still doing it today.
Fruit Ninja. That's like that's my favorite,
Ninja.
totally intuitive. You know exactly how that game is supposed to work. You swipe your finger along and slice the fruit. Like that's
I haven't
brilliant
played
game
Fruit
design.
Ninja in 10 years. I
Me,
haven't played
me
it in a
either.
really
But
long time.
I just saw that the other day on something. And I was like, oh man, that is the perfect game design. No instructions on that.
Can I just tell you the one I miss the most, because I can't find it anywhere anymore? Once the PlayStation 4 was gone, so was SSX, which was a snowboarding game. Like, that
Oh,
was
I don't know
open world. That was, you could ski anywhere down a hill. Like, I loved that game. And because I can't go back 2 versions on my new PlayStation, like, I can't
Oh,
play it anymore. I miss that. There
well,
are games that I truly miss. Like, I wish I had them back. I wish I could do that.
I
And it
miss some of this, like Simpsons Road Rage. I miss that one.
Oh, that was good too. Yeah, the
Yeah.
phone Simpsons games aren't that great.
No.
Anyway, all right, gaming is 50 years old roughly. In 50 years, we went from a blip on a radar screen to the largest entertainment industry on the planet, bigger than movies, bigger than music. And it did it by doing something no other medium quite does the same way. It made the audience responsible for the outcome.
Yeah. Some of these games, the AAA title games, can cost $1 billion to make,
Yeah, it
Crazy.
takes
Yeah.
hundreds of people in a team to
Yeah.
do it.
10
Yeah.
years or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interactivity, though, it changes the relationship. When you watch a film, the narrative happens to you. When you read a book, the narrative unfolds for you. When you play a game, the narrative happens because of you, or doesn't happen because of you. I always do all the little side quests. I try to stave off the main quest as long as I can. You can be casual. Your choices have weight. Your failures have consequences, and that's a fundamentally different cognitive and emotional experience.
And the progression from Zork's text parser to Elden Ring's open world is the story of designers constantly expanding what your choices can mean. From go north or go south to jump or don't jump, to spare him or don't spare him. Oh, that's really
Yeah,
wow. I don't
man.
like making choices
Blake.
like that. To choices that span entire games, entire series, entire fictional lifetimes.
My daughter, she loves Knights of the Old Republic, which is, it's sort of a role playing, thing based on Star Wars. And you can choose to go dark side or light side. And she always has a hard time with the dark side because she's like, I don't want to,
I don't wanna hurt anybody.
yeah, I don't want to hurt anybody. I feel bad about that. Like,
Well,
yeah,
that's a good thing. I'm glad she has a moral
well,
compass.
of course, me too. Yeah. The technology changed, right? The design philosophies have evolved. The business model went from quarters in an arcade to live service games that are technically never finished now. But the core loop never changed. Here's a world, here are the rules, figure it out.
And maybe that's why gaming got under our skin in a way other media didn't, not quite, right? Because failing at the game feels like failing at something real. The stakes are simulated, but the frustration is genuine. The victory is virtual, but the satisfaction is like real. You feel like you accomplished something.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't actually distinguish between the two. The emotion is real. And 50 years in, the medium figured out how to make that emotion do almost anything.
Yeah. you can grieve for a pixelated character.
Make you afraid of the dark because of a creature you've never seen.
Yeah, or make you coordinate 40 strangers to achieve a shared objective.
Make you stand in front of a machine in a diner, lose all your quarters, and come back the next day anyway because something in the system was waiting to be understood.
Yeah, that's not really entertainment, right? That's an education mechanism. That's the longest, weirdest, most expensive curriculum ever designed.
And we paid for it by the quarter. Then $50, then $70, then monthly subscriptions. And we'll pay whatever comes next because at some point, a text on a screen said, "You're standing in the field west of a White House." And we walked in.
Yeah.
I love Zork. If the Grue ate you, we forgive you.
If you credit Aerith's, I think that's the name, death, you're not alone. See, I didn't know that one. Yeah. We don't talk about it, but you're not alone.
And if you still hold a Pizza Parlor high score.
Yeah, don't let anyone take it from you. That's yours. You earned it. You earned it, Renee.
Thank you.
Now, this is the Nostalgic Nerds podcast, where the games that broke us turn out to have been building us all along.
Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, follow, share this with someone who has strong opinions about SNES versus Genesis or the PlayStation. That's what I always played. We'll be back next week, loading a new cartridge. Mark, thanks. It was fun.
Thank you. And thanks to all our listeners for Overcast. We've got a ton of Overcast listeners now, so thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
I can feel the great underground through the hinges in the gates, likely to be eaten, likely to be gone, likely to be lost before the light comes on. But I'm walking anyway with a dying match in hand, likely to be eaten, and I want to understand. Elven sword is glowing blue, something's moving in the dark. Thief was here and left the trophy case, empty as my lantern spark. happy to be